Hi, Blake. We can hear you definitely. So we can start in a few minutes, okay?
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you, Constantine. And just a quick question, if that's okay, Constantine.
Sure.
For the session, would you like me to, would it be more of kind of like an interview ask question, or do you want me to do any PowerPoint? If so, I'm happy to do it, but if it's more just a question and answer kind of thing, I'm happy for that as well.
So I think it's the best way, kind of, questions and answer, like interview
Perfect.
session.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. That's what I was anticipating, but I thought it would be good to ask just to be sure.
All right, yeah, sure. But if you'd like to share any information in PowerPoint, yeah, please, more than welcome.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm happy to just do it through question and answer, and I can talk just verbally about those ones that would normally be in the PowerPoint. As you said, maybe it's probably more a better setting for the audience as well too. So happy to do that.
All right. I'm just trying to fix my camera, so give me a couple minutes, okay?
No, take your time, no problem.
All right, thank you. Добрый вечер, уважаемые участники сегодняшнего вебинара. Добрый вечер, родители, студенты, коллеги и все те, кто смог принять участие в нашем сегодняшнем мероприятии. Спасибо вам, что нашли время. Да, мы обещаем, что сегодняшний вебинар будет не скучным. Наша компания, как вы знаете, достаточно часто проводит подобные вебинары, семинары, посвященные образованию в англоязычных странах. Вот. Достаточно давно не было вебинара, посвященному именно образованию в США. Вот, поэтому мы сегодня исправляемся и проводим вебинар, посвященный двум замечательным высшим учебным заведениям, которые находятся, наверное, в самых популярных студенческих городах США. Это Queens College, который является частью системы City University of New York, Да, и сегодня мы поговорим об учебном заведении University of Massachusetts Boston, университет, который находится в Бостоне, в самом студенческом городке. Вот. Но для начала позвольте мне представиться. Меня зовут Константин Барков, я являюсь специалистом по образованию в США. И прежде чем мы приступим к основной части нашего вебинара, позвольте мне несколько слов сказать о нашей компании. Я уверен, что многие из вас уже присутствовали на наших вебинарах не один раз, да, потому что наша компания дважды в неделю проводит мероприятия. Вот. И наша компания была основана в 1992 году. В следующем году мы будем отмечать уже юбилей 30 лет. Наша компания оказывает полный комплекс услуг. Мы занимаемся не только помощью в зачислении в высшие учебные заведения, да, мы также оказываем помощь в получении визы, да, и как многие из вас уже догадываются, зачастую помощь в зачислении визы – это гораздо сложнее, это гораздо более объемнее, чем само зачисление в высшее учебное заведение в англоязычную страну, в частности в США. Особенно сейчас, в период пандемии, очень много нюансов, тонкостей существует при получении визы, да, при пересечении границы и так далее. Наша компания оказывает полный комплекс услуг, да, с нашим агентством, да, вы можете быть уверены в том, что вы зачислитесь, получите визу и сможете уехать в желаемую страну. Вот. Но так как мы сегодня говорим о США, поэтому фокусировка будет именно на эту страну. Наша компания очень большая, она имеет более 40 филиалов по России, в Украине, Казахстане и Вьетнаме офисы есть. Вот. И сегодняшнее мероприятие мне будет помогать мой коллега, специалист по североамериканскому направлению, Ростислав. Ростислав, приветствую. Да, скажи пару слов о себе.
Добрый вечер, Константин. Друзья, здравствуйте. Меня слышно, видно?
Да, Ростислав, тебя видно, слышно.
Отлично.
Да, Ростислав у нас является руководителем североамериканского направления в украинском офисе, в киевском офисе, прошу прощения. Да, он отвечает за весь украинский рынок. Вот, Ростислав сегодня будет помогать мне проводить мероприятия. Вот. Также наша компания имеет свою собственную школу по подготовке к экзамену Ielts. Да, для тех, кто не знает, что это за экзамен, это экзамен на знание английского языка у неносителя, то есть у того человека, у которого английский язык не является родным. Вот, экзамен Ielts нужен для того, чтобы поступить в любое англоязычное учебное заведение. Будь то США, Канада, Австралия, Новая Зеландия, Великобритания, Ирландия, даже Малайзия и многие другие страны, да, и Сингапур в частности, они требуют экзамен на знание английского языка. Да. Они хотят убедиться, то есть учебные заведения хотят убедиться в том, что у вас достаточно сильный уровень английского языка для прохождения учебы в той или иной стране. Да. Для этого необходимо сдать экзамен Ielts. Да. Чтобы его сдать, нужно к нему подготовиться. Да. Где подготовиться? В нашей школе, в школе Ielts School. Возьмите телефон, запишите все контакты, сайт ielts-school.ru. В конце презентации я расскажу о приятном бонусе, о нашей 20% скидке для всех участников сегодняшнего вебинара на групповые программы в школе Ielts School. Также наша компания имеет свой собственный центр по сдаче экзамена Ielts. Да, то есть у вас есть возможность к экзамену Ielts подготовиться в нашей школе, да, и записаться на сдачу экзамена Ielts нашей компании, да, и сдать этот экзамен. Вот. И я постараюсь, конечно, много времени не отнимать у вас, так как нашим основным спикером, нашим гостем является мистер Блейк Эгберт. Блейк представляет два учебных заведения сегодня. Да, он будет рассказывать как о Queen's College, так и об университете Массачусетса в Бостоне. Вот. И я с радостью передаю слово Блейку. Hi, Blake. So I think you can start.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Constantine, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm so excited to speak with each of you a little bit more about Queens College of the City University of New York and the University of Massachusetts at Boston. So thank you so much for today. Wonderful. So if you'd like, Constantine, I'm happy to do just a brief background on both schools, just so everyone can kind of get familiar with both Queens College and Umass Boston before we go into some Q&A and some questions as well too throughout that. So happy to kind of first talk a little bit about Queens College of the City University of New York. So for those of you that, excuse me, haven't had the pleasure of going to the United States yet, or visiting New York City, it is an amazing city. New York City is actually the largest city here in the United States as a whole, and that is where we are located here with Queens College of the City University of New York. Here at Queens College, we are actually really well known for three key areas, and those are our location for students. So as I'm mentioning, right here in New York City. Many people actually don't know this, but Queens College here, actually a lot of our students have gone on to work for some really well-known companies here in New York City, but even throughout the United States as a whole. So we've had graduates that have gone on to work for companies such as Amazon, even Google, even NASA, just to name a few throughout that. And there are 40,000 businesses here in New York City alone. So if students are interested in, postgraduate opportunities, work, internship, things like that, they have those things available here in New York City. We are also really well known for our diversity on campus. So Queens College, about 35% of our student population is actually international students, which is amazing in itself. So if students are coming here, they're certainly going to meet students from Russia, from other RCIS regions and countries as well too. Obviously American students and people from all over. So I tell students, don't be surprised if you're actually walking on campus and you're hearing Russian spoken. You're obviously hearing English. You might hear Hindi, all sorts of different languages throughout that as well too. But also here at Queens College, we really are well known for our affordable costs. And I know we may speak about that in just a moment, but we're really well known for our affordable fee structure for students. Oftentimes students think, New York City, is it expensive? It can be at times, but thankfully here at Queens College, we have a really affordable fee structure. And I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. We have programs.
Yeah, Blake,
yep, sorry, go ahead, Constantine.
Yeah, I'm really sorry for interrupting you, but could you please briefly explain what is the difference between college and university in the USA? Because in Russia and Ukraine, it's a huge difference, and the people. So when you say college, the people think it's something like the place where you go after ninth grade, and it's not higher education, but it's way different in the USA. So please briefly explain to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for asking that question, Constantine. And that's a great question. And one I get asked quite a bit, and one that's very important because in other countries, as you mentioned, Constantine, college can mean something different. So maybe not as high as a university from that standpoint. But here in the US, as you alluded to, it actually is much different. So here in the United States, college and university are actually the exact same. So here in the United States, we actually use the words college and university interchangeably. If you're going to college, if you're going to the university, the degree, the value of education, everything within it is actually the exact same. So there is no difference between that as well too. If you're a student or you're looking at, the top 100 universities in the United States, you're going to see both colleges and universities within those actually as well too throughout that. So essentially there is no difference between the two. And here at Queens College, we actually are part of what we call the City University of New York system. And some of you may have not heard of that, and if so, that's certainly okay actually throughout that. So the City University of New York is the largest urban public education system in the United States. So there's actually 25 different schools that are underneath the CUNY system, so the City University of New York, and Queens College is a part of that actually as well too. So it is the second largest school within the City University of New York system. So really good question, Constantine, and thank you for bringing that up, because that's something that I can certainly see many people asking. Yeah, wonderful. And just a few last minute things before I move on, just to give a brief introduction for the University of Massachusetts at Boston. Here at Queens College, we do have a variety of different programs. So whether students are interested in studying business, whether they're interested in studying science programs, even arts and music, we have everything in between for students. So all sorts of different majors that are offered for students. So if you are interested in coming through any of those as well too, you certainly can throughout that. But also we do have great student success and track records. So here at Queens, we've had 3 graduates that have gone on to become Fulbright scholars. We've actually had students that have become Pulitzer Prize winners as well too throughout that. So certainly great opportunities. And that's what we want to make sure, is that students are set up to succeed, and that as soon as you graduate, you have those opportunities to get the great work experience that you're looking for, to get a great, hopefully average starting salary upon that. Our students here at Queens, actually upon graduation, the average starting salary is roughly $65,000 to $70,000 US dollars per year. Again, right upon graduating. So we have great success throughout that. Wonderful. With that, I do want to talk a little bit about just a brief introduction into the University of Massachusetts at Boston, because I am covering 2 different institutions today, and I really want to talk about the wonderful school that is Umass Boston. Many of you have probably heard of Boston. I actually used to live right outside of Boston myself, and am very familiar with the wonderful city that it is. And we have a great partnership with the University of Massachusetts at Boston. So Boston, many of you may not know, but it actually is the #1 student city in the entire United States. A lot of people don't know that. Some people tend to think it may be actually New York City or even Los Angeles, to name a few throughout that. But Boston actually is the #1 student city in the US, and it's actually number 13 in the entire world throughout that. So according to QS News overall. Now, Boston is also home to what we call the City of Innovation. Many of you are familiar with Facebook. Boston obviously is home to Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg created it right in his dorm room at Harvard University, right in the wonderful city of Boston. So Facebook got started here. Converse shoes, even New Balance, if you're familiar, is located, the headquarters, and started here in Boston. TripAdvisor, even for those of you that love coffee, Dunkin' Donuts, you may be familiar, all started right here in the wonderful city of Boston. Now, our campus at Umass Boston is located in the north end of Boston, so very close to downtown. It is a great sprawling campus, so really easy for students to navigate around. So if you're really trying to navigate to find your classes, to go to the different campus facilities, such as the gym, such as the advising center, even the career center, it's really easy to move around and to get through those types of things as well too around campus. Now, what is Umass Boston known for? What are their key areas? First and foremost, it has a great business school. Umass Boston is really well known for their business programs. Their business school actually on campus is a Tier 1 business school, which is the highest that you can achieve as a business school here in the United States. So again, Tier 1 as a whole. It also, Umass Boston is number 104 for top public schools in the United States. So they have great rankings behind it as well too. So if you're a student and you're looking for different rankings for institutions, because rankings are an important part as you decide where you're going to study in the US, that's really something to focus on. I don't know if many of you know this, but in the United States alone, there are over 4,500 universities. So you can imagine how difficult it may be for a student to choose one school out of all 4,500. But what I really want to mention is student success and opportunities at Umass Boston. UMB, for short, actually has about $63 million in research funding. That is an amazing amount right within itself. And the great thing about that research funding, it means all that money comes into the universities that allows students to do things like research, do things like projects, to work on your particular field of study. That is an amazing thing within itself as well, too. Now, students at Umass Boston, within 5 years after graduating, so again, 5 years after graduating, their average starting salary within their employment is $140,000 US. I can't tell you how amazing that is within itself, and that is well above the national average here in the US alone. And so they really focus on helping students upon graduating, getting good jobs, having those wonderful opportunities. And again, if students are looking to study anything between business, science programs, management, even health sciences, engineering, they have everything in between throughout that as well too. So I hope that gives a brief snapshot for everyone here about Queens College of the City University of New York and Umass Boston, just to have a quick background. And with that, happy to pass it on over to you as well too, Konstantin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Blake, for briefly information about Queens College and Boston. So could you please tell us what are the most popular programs in Queens College and in Boston?
Yeah, great question. And I'll start off with Queens College as well too. So at Queens College, the most popular programs for students in this order as well are first and foremost business. Business is the most popular program at Queens College. So they have a great business administration program. So if you want to really focus on certain key areas such as international business, or maybe finance, or maybe even accounting, they have those focus areas that you can study within that. Secondly, the most popular programs would be science-based programs. And I would probably say the top two most popular science programs are computer science, because that is a really in-demand program in STREAM right now at the moment, especially STEM programs here in the US. So computer science is really well known at Queens. Believe it or not, there are actually more computer science students at Queens College than any other university in New York City. They have a ton of students in computer science, and there's even it's called a university hackathon. And what that is, every single year, the entire city of New York City hosts this hackathon where all the schools in New York City take part. NYU, New York Institute of Technology, Queens College, all the schools take part in that. And in the last 3 years, students at Queens College have actually won first place in this university hackathon, so for computer science. So really great program. But lastly, really well-known programs that students are interested in that are very popular are art programs. So if you're a student that wants to study, say, art history, performing arts, such as even theater, even drama within that, or obviously painting, Queens College has a great program within that. It's no secret that New York City is home to Broadway, so performing arts, drama. So that's something that really stands out, and part of the reason why students are interested in those programs. Now, for Umass Boston, it's actually a little bit similar in a sense, where the most popular are business programs, specifically management. So many students are really looking to study management here at Umass Boston, and that's probably the most in-demand program right now. Umass Boston also, if you have any students here that are interested in graduate programs, so master's degree, MBA is an immensely popular program here at UMB and something that students are looking to study. The MBA program is actually one of the more highly ranked programs here in the United States at Umass Boston. Secondly, students here at UMB, one of the more popular programs would be computer science. So also similar to Queens, computer science is a really popular program. Again, STEM programs in general, science, technology, engineering, mathematics are really in demand right now amongst all students studying in the US. And part of that is because of OPT, where they can remain back in the United States up to 3 years upon graduating to work in their field of study. And that leads me into my third and final most popular program at Umass Boston, being engineering programs. So if you're a student that wants to study engineering, such as computer engineering, even electrical engineering, Umass Boston is a great place to be throughout that. There are wonderful engineering companies that are here in the city of Boston alone that come to UMass Boston to take part in their career fairs, where students can meet with them to get job opportunities or internships. So those are probably the programs that are the most popular at the moment for our students.
Mm-hmm. So, and Blake, as a summary of popular programs for international students, could you please name 3 STEM programs in Queens College and 3 STEM programs in Umass Boston?
Absolutely, happy to. So STEM programs, so if you're looking at Queens College, probably the top, sorry, I hope you can hear me, Konstantin. So STEM programs at Queens College. So the top 3 programs here at Queens College for STEM would be computer science, mathematics, and physics. Those would be the top 3 STEM programs that are available here at Queens College. And at UMass Boston, it would also be computer science. It would be electrical engineering or computer engineering within that as well too, and then chemistry. So those would be 3 key STEM programs. And if it's okay, Konstantin, I just want to mention to everyone watching again, in the United States, after you graduate, so after you get your degree and finish and get your certificate, you do have a certain amount of time where you can stay back in the United States to continue working in your field of study. So if you study a STEM program like Konstantin is mentioning, you can remain here in the United States up to 3 years upon graduating to work in your field, in your program. And any non-STEM program, you also have a certain amount of time available to stay back, but it would be 1 year. So that's part of the advantage of studying a STEM program as well.
Blake, I'm here.
Yes.
May I please ask you to tell us more about tuition fees? So this is very important, part of the whole process. We need to give like a deep look into it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that great question. And this is something that is probably the most popular question that I get from students at times, honestly, is what are the tuition fees? What are the fee structure like? So for Queens College at the City University of New York, the tuition fee is only $18,600 US for undergraduate students. So really affordable. Kind of going back to my opening there about Queens College, we are known for our affordable fee structure for students. So again, tuition is only $18,600. And if you're thinking, what's the total fee for the entire 1-year cost if I'm a student? What am I expected to pay for, mandatory fees, tuition, health insurance, everything in between? You're looking to spend about $30,000 US per year. So again, including that tuition cost of $18,000. Now at UMass,
I think we even have to look even deeper. I mean, the comparison of living costs in 2 cities, which is more expensive, which is less expensive. So we need to compare this more seriously, if possible.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And great point throughout that as well, too. And I'll mention UMass Boston and their fees, and then happy to compare between the 2 as well. University of Massachusetts at Boston, tuition fee for an undergraduate student is just right at $32,000 US. So just a little bit more expensive than Queens College. And if you're a graduate student, their tuition fees are going to be about $29,000 US for a student per year. So still relatively reasonable, especially for a great institution like UMass Boston. Now, if you're looking at living expenses, which is a big part of studying abroad and a big part of any city that you go to, UMass Boston, we're in the city of Boston, and Queens College, so in New York City, the living expenses aren't too much different because both are major cities and both are here in the northeastern part of the United States. So in UMass Boston, so if you're studying in the great city of Boston, your living expenses, it's best to budget about $12,000 to $15,000 per year on average. And what I mean by living expenses, accommodation costs, food, things like that as well too, any extras, clothing, things that you may purchase while you're here. So all those things factor into that. Now,
so attending bars and all this, it's not included, right?
So yeah, any bar expenses, things like that may be a bit different, obviously, throughout that. And what I will say too, each student is different. So that 12,000 to 15,000 is certainly just an approximation, because some students, for example, accommodation costs drastically varies, because some students share their accommodation with other students, which can kind of help bring down the costs a little bit as well too. Now, in New York City, in terms of a per year cost for cost of living, I tell students anticipate roughly around that same amount. So anywhere from $12,000 to $14,000 per year. So again, accommodations, food expenses, things like that, even books and fees, as you think about some of those things for, purchasing books, things like that as well too. There are plenty of accommodations right off of campus, because at Queens College, we're in the borough of Queens within New York City, which thankfully is one of the more affordable boroughs or areas that is here as well too. So there's several off-campus accommodations that are even less than $1,000 per year that are great accommodations for students throughout that. So I always tell students, try to budget within those approximations.
So summing up, 15,000 extras is okay, right?
That is okay. That is correct. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. Thank you.
I think we have a question in chat. So it's from Maria, and she asked, could you tell me if you have musical programs in Boston?
Yeah, thank you so much, Maria, for that question. So unfortunately, we don't have any music programs at Umass Boston, but we do have music programs at Queens College in New York City. So if you are interested or a student within that as well too, we do have music at Queens College, both for vocal. So if you're interested in singing, taking part within that, or even music introduction, music history, we do have those, but unfortunately we do not at Boston. So, but great question.
So Blake, and we have another question from the visitors. What are admission requirements for students from Russia and Ukraine? So to answer this question, you probably may share your presentation, and it might be easier to understand and to see admission requirements for both schools. Yeah, we can't hear you, Blake.
Sorry about that. I forgot to unmute. Thank you so much, Konstantin. Yeah. So what I will do, I'm actually going to, I'll share my screen, and I'm actually going to point it to actually our website, which can really help out covering those admissions requirements through that with everyone here as well too. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So hopefully you should see this pop up. So just let me know if for some reason it does not, but hopefully you can see here our Umass Boston website. So I hope that it's popping up here as well too. So for UMass Boston, so in terms of entry requirements, so if you're a student studying from Russia to start off, for an undergraduate student, the minimum requirement in terms of entry from an academic standpoint is just the local certificate of secondary education, so the attestat there with a 3.0 average or higher. So again, 3.0 average or higher, again, if you are an undergraduate student. And if you are studying from the Ukraine, all that they require is either the attestat with the grade 4 or higher on the 12-point scale, or attestat with grade 3 or higher on the 5-point scale. So that is the requirement from an academic standpoint. Now, if you're thinking, what about my English criteria? What do I need to meet for my English entry requirement throughout that? So for UMB, there's a few options. So again, if you are an undergraduate student, the minimum Ielts score that they require is to start your academic studies right away is a 5.0 Ielts. And that will put you in the GSSP with a little bit of academic English. So you'll have a mixture of some English language within that. But if you don't need any additional English support, so if your English is already suitable, if you have a 5.5 or higher, then you'll be placed right away into your academic program without any English support needed through that. Now, you may be wondering, what happens if I don't have a 5.0 Ielts? What if it is lower than that? So if you do have lower, 4.5 or less, then you can take just fully English as a second language courses. So just English courses in general, but I will say most of our students from the region there usually have at least a 5.5 IELTS through there as well too. And there are a few other English results or tests that we do accept. Just to mention, Umass Boston does now accept the Duolingo English test as well too, because we know that many students have had difficulties in booking things like IELTS tests and things like that recently because of the COVID pandemic. So we do accept Duolingo as an English criteria as well. Now, I want to real quick mention as well, Constantine, that for undergraduate students at UMass Boston, we do not require the SAT or ACT. So it is not a requirement for entry into any program. Now, if you already have taken the SAT or ACT, or if you are planning to, that is okay. You can certainly still continue on and take that test examination as well too, but it is not required as part of your studies. Now, for students that are interested in studying graduate programs, we do have graduate direct entry here at UMass Boston for students. And if you're looking from a country by country requirement, again, these are for students looking at master's programs. If you are studying from Russia and got your bachelor's degree there, they would just require a bachelor's grade of a 3 out of 4. So with Karusho of good or a grade 3 out of 4. And if you're from the Ukraine, exactly similar to that, a bachelor's degree with a 3 out of 4 grade within that as well. Now, again, they are focusing primarily at the moment on direct entry programs for students. So if you've taken the IELTS, you will need to have a minimum of a 6.0 at the moment for your IELTS test throughout that as well too, as they look forward for students coming through that program. Now, with that, I want to transition now into Queens College. So for the entry requirements. So if you are looking at Queens College, so in the City University of New York, as an undergraduate student, the minimum is the exact same as UMass Boston. So the attestat, so the Certificate of Secondary Education, with a 3.0 average. That is the minimum. So the base minimum that is just required for students. Now, if you're from the Ukraine, just need the attestat with a grade 4 average on the 12-point scale, or a grade 3 average if you're on the 5-point scale overall throughout that. And finally, in terms of English requirements, if you're a student studying, the minimum IELTS requirement to come into Queens College is a 5.0. So again, just a 5.0 is required, excuse me, in terms of the English entry requirements. We also do accept Duolingo as well too, as I mentioned. So that is an entry option for students if they have not taken IELTS, TOEFL, or any other examination throughout that. SAT, ACT also is not required at Queens College. So it is not required for any student, even American students. Many schools right now in the United States actually are waiving SAT and even ACT because of the current pandemic, but Queens actually does not require it as a whole either. Now, the last thing I want to mention for both schools, if you've studied British curriculum, so say IB, O levels, A levels, if you've done that and you've studied at least 2 years in fully taught English courses, so at least 2 years of fully taught courses in English, that can actually waive any English test, such as an IELTS or anything else. So again, if you have studied at least 2 years in a fully taught English language curriculum, then we will waive any English proficiency test that is needed as well.
So, Blake, seems like we have a few questions. So the question from Zoya, hello, is Queens College a community college?
Yeah, so great question. And I know I touched upon this just a little bit briefly earlier as well too. And so Queens College is not a community college. Good question though, and that comes up often. So as I was mentioning earlier, here in the United States, the words college and university are used interchangeably. So there actually is no difference. Even if you were to do a Google search right now, it'll even pull up, because many people have had that question about, is there any difference between the two? Because around the rest of the world, there certainly is. But here in the US, college and university, there is no difference between that. but also Queens College actually is a part of a university system. So we're a part of the City University of New York system. So again, Queens College at the City University of New York. And I see here, if it's okay, Constantine, there's a few other questions. I'm happy to answer them as I see through here as well. One question by Sasha is, if you have been in the US for 1 year, is your chance to join the university in New York bigger? That's a really good question. Fantastic question, actually, from that. So if you have been in the United States already for a year, things vary just depending on what kind of visa you're on. So to give you an example, it's always a benefit for a student if you're already in the United States, whether you've been here for a tourist visa, whether you've been here studying, say, at a local high school, or doing an exchange program. It's really helps out when it comes to your visa process. So later on, whenever you have to change your visa status over to become what is called an F1 student visa, which means you're studying obviously within some sort of education. So that usually does help out within that. Now, does it help in your chance of admission? With any institution that you're looking to study at, I'll use Queens College at the City University as an example for this question. You still have to meet the entry criteria into the university. So we still would look at those as I was going through the Russia and Ukraine entry requirements. So you still would have to meet that minimum GPA academic requirement. So even if you've been here in the US, you still have to meet those minimum requirements from your post or either your secondary school studies to come into here. So it does help when it comes to your visa, but we still need to see that you meet the academic requirements for your program. Another question came through is, you have to tell us more about your year in the US. Oh, sorry, that was a response to that question as well too. So exactly, it really depends on what kind of visa that you're on, what your purpose was here as well too for your students. So it really depends upon that. So again, some students we've had that have come to us that were on tourist visas initially and then ended up transitioning into their undergraduate studies. We've had students that were here studying locally at a high school and then came on over to Queens College. So it really just depends upon that. So thank you for those of you that put that in there as well.
Blake, another question about probably most popular question among of international students, scholarships. Do you have any scholarships in Queens College and in Boston? So if the student can cover all admission requirements, do they have any chance to get any scholarship?
Yes, this probably, first off, this is a great question because as a student, it's really important to look at your options and when it comes to scholarships, because if you're a great student or you just exploring your funding opportunities, that's really important to always ask. So I always encourage students, please ask about those opportunities that are available. The short and great answer is yes, we do have scholarship opportunities, both at Queens College, the City University of New York, and the University of Massachusetts at Boston. So we do have scholarships for international students. Right now, if you're considering coming to the United States for your studies for this upcoming September intake, so for this fall semester, we actually have a scholarship opportunity at both schools of up to $2,000 US for your entry. So again, up to $2,000 US for your entry as a scholarship opportunity through one of our global student success programs. So a path for international students here. The good news is, as a student, you actually do not have to submit any application form for that. So you don't have to worry about applying for that scholarship. All you have to do is just once you've applied, so once you've submitted your application through there too, if you receive the admission letter, that scholarship will come along with that as well too if you are eligible. So yes, we do have those great scholarship opportunities for students for that as well too. And I also want to mention, when you are here at our institution, so when you are here during your studies, there are other scholarship opportunities that are available once you are here. Every single semester at our schools, we have what are called academic engagement and merit scholarships. So you are eligible for those when you are here as well too. So really good question. Yeah, and I think I see another question. I'm just going to kind of go through if that helps out as well too. Is it possible to stay and work after 3 years post-study visa expires? So great question. So as I was mentioning earlier about that OPT, so optional practical training, where after you graduate, can you remain back here in the United States? And you can, if you're in a STEM program, up to 3 years. What happens after that? So what happens when that 3 years is up, which is a great question there, Sonia. Thank you for that. When that period is up, there's a couple of different options. One, your time is ended for that OPT. So most students return back to their home countries or other countries to work in their particular field. Now, if you are wanting to remain back here in the United States after that OPT time is ended, depending on the company you're working with, they may elect to sponsor you for something called an H-1B visa, which means that you can remain back here in the United States for a longer period to continue working. And again, for H-1B visas, every year the United States issues about 84,000 of them. And they're usually sponsored by the companies that the student is working for throughout that. So again, there is a possibility throughout that. Good question. And I think, Sonia, you also have another question. Is the admission based solely on exams? Really good question. So the short answer is no, the admission is not based solely on exams from that standpoint. Most of the admissions here within our 2 schools, so again, Queens College and Umass Boston, is based on your secondary school academics, so your transcripts throughout that. Since we do not require, SAT or ACT, we don't take those examinations into consideration for your entry. We will just look at your academic transcripts from your secondary school studies and then your English result that you have from that as well too. So when you submit an application, all that we require besides your online application form is just copies of your transcripts, a copy of your passport, and then a copy of your a copy of your English result if you have it as well too. So those other examinations certainly are not required. Good question, Sonia.
And Blake, probably last of my questions. What is current situation in Boston, in Queens College, in terms of COVID and vaccination? So you personally have you been vaccinated by Pfizer vaccine or any other? I don't know. Like, could you please us fresh news about COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important as well, too. So to answer your first question, Constantine, yes, I have been vaccinated. So thankfully, I've received my first dose of my vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine as well, too. As you're probably familiar with, those watching, it is a 2-dose vaccine. So I'm actually scheduled to get my second dose in about a week coming up now as well, too. So I'm really excited about that as well, too. Now, in terms of here in the United States and for the situation in Boston and New York around COVID and even what classes are going to look like, the good news is, thankfully, things are really improving right now in the US when it comes to COVID-19, specifically in Boston and New York City, both throughout that. Most of you may have saw or may know, but right now, President Biden, he is actually his goal is to have 200 million people vaccinated in the United States within his first 100 days. Actually, they're on track to surpass that quicker than 100 days, which is good news, thankfully, throughout that as well, too. And the great news, both Boston and New York City, the COVID situation is really improving in both cities. In particular, I know in New York City, most of you have probably saw in the news, unfortunately, when COVID-19 first really hit the United States, unfortunately, New York City was the epicenter. That was the main area where COVID was rampant, where infections were on the rise. But things have really improved in New York City and Boston since then. Actually, in both states, so Massachusetts and in New York State, they're actually, vaccines are available for everyone. So where before it was, on certain categories, if you had some health issues or if you were a healthcare worker. Yep. Sorry, go ahead, Constantine.
So even for international students, right?
Yeah, we've had international students at both schools that have gotten their vaccine. So to give you an example, at Queens College just last weekend, they actually did a COVID vaccine drive where healthcare workers came to campus and were giving out the vaccines. And some of our international students went and received the vaccine as well too. So, so it is open for those as well too, again, in both, which is really good news throughout that. Now, what does this mean for this upcoming fall semester in the future? So at both schools, so Queens College and Umass Boston, for the fall semester, they will be doing a hybrid mode of instruction. So what is hybrid? Hybrid means there will be a mixture of online and in-person classes. So students will take both online and in-person classes. Now, more than likely, as a student, you will probably have more online classes than you will in person within that as well too. But again, we are working to have some sort of in-person component behind that. Now, if you have an in-person class, what does that mean? Well, both schools are still taking the proper measures to make sure that the safety measures and that everything is clean for students on campuses. So both schools, all the classrooms, if you do have an in-person class, will be properly measured. So there will be a 6 feet distance between all the desks, everything in between. Students do have to wear masks. So if you are going to be on campus at any point, you do have to still wear a mask. Again, just to make sure that all the proper measures and things like that are in place. Now, if you're a student and you are still nervous about coming to the United States or traveling in general with COVID still going on, you can still take your classes online from your home country. So if you are from Russia or you're from the Ukraine and you're wanting to still take your class online for this fall from your home, you can do that. And then you can look to arrive in person later on. So you can still do that. And both schools are making sure that classes are kind of taught at a appropriate time for students. So our professors are aware there is a time difference from that. So they are working with students to help them through that. So again, you have the option to come or do it from your home country, whatever's more convenient for you as a student.
Thank you so much, Blake. It was very informative, and I hope this information will help a lot of students to go either New York or Boston. So I think it's a great news when international students can be vaccinated with the great vaccine from Pfizer. And so Blake, give us like 3-5 minutes. Me and my colleague Rostislav will make a summary, and we will talk about the summary in Russian language. So if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that sounds great, Konstantin, right? Absolutely.
Okay. Да, еще раз добрый вечер, уважаемые участники вебинара. Возможно, кто-то из вас подключился немножко позже официального времени начала мероприятия. Мы хотели бы подвести небольшие итоги сегодняшнего вебинара с моим коллегой Ростиславом. Вот. И из того, что сегодня сказал Блейк, да, я хочу, чтобы вы уяснили несколько вещей. Да, первая вещь – это что вступительные требования в американские университеты, в частности, Queens College, да, и университет Массачусетса, они не такие высокие. По сути дела, каждый среднестатистический студент из Украины и из России имеет возможность на общем основании поступить в один из этих учебных заведений. Вот. Вторая важная вещь, которую я хочу, чтобы вы тоже запомнили, да, что ситуация с ковидом в США, она стабилизируется, да, и по темпам вакцинации США занимает сейчас первое место. Если 2 месяца назад в США вакцинировали около 1 миллиона человек в день, да, то сейчас уровень вакцинации несколько миллионов человек в день, да, и уже вот на сегодняшний день более 140 миллионов граждан США получили вакцину, да, 1 или 2 вакцины, но как минимум 1, да, и они ожидают второй вакцинации. Вот. К в течение ближайших 3 месяцев президент Байден хочет, чтобы как минимум 200 миллионов населения США получили эту вакцину. Американцы предлагают поставить вакцину абсолютно каждому человеку. В частности, если вы иностранный студент из России, из Украины приехали учиться в Бостон, либо в Нью-Йорк, и у вас есть желание поставить прививку от ковида, вы это спокойно можете сделать, и это абсолютно бесплатно.
Константин, я бы, наверное, еще добавил несколько, ну, скажем, таких более обыденных моментов. Ну, скажем так, насчет визы. Все должны понимать, что для учебы в американском университете нужна виза категории F1. Если вы были до этого в Штатах, это приветствуется, но мы помним о том, что цель должна быть более-менее подходящая. Ну, то есть, если человек случайно попал нелегально, это может отразиться. Если вы учились в школе, как вот у нас, вот Саша писал в чате, что он учился в школе, это, естественно, плюс, потому что уже есть понимание того, как происходит учебный процесс в Америке, как это все построено, как у них уроки и все остальное. То есть это, конечно же, плюс. Вот. Также стоит помнить, что для поступления обязательно нужно сдать тест подтверждения владения английским языком. Это может быть как TOEFL, так и Ielts. Вот, опять же, если у вас есть неуверенность, что вы сможете его сдать, мы приглашаем вас к нам на наши курсы, мы поможем вам подготовиться, ну и, конечно же, сдать сам экзамен. То есть помните, что мы оказываем такую возможность всем нашим клиентам. Поэтому не забывайте, обращайтесь. У нас есть и подготовка, и сам тест, конечно же. Ну вот.
Да, уважаемые участники, напоминаю вам, что у вас есть возможность писать вопросы нам с Ростиславом, либо нашему представителю Блейку в чате. У вас есть буквально несколько минут для того, чтобы задать все интересующие вопросы. Если вы не успеете сделать это сегодня, вы всегда можете сделать завтра, послезавтра. Да, мы всегда работаем для вас, готовы помогать вам в решении любых задач. Вот. И пока вы, возможно, обдумываете, какой вопрос задать, я хотел бы вот буквально 1 минутку сказать о ситуации со студенческими визами. Вот. То, что касается жителей Украины, вам немножко повезло больше, потому что посольство США в Украине достаточно активно работает на прием документов для получения студенческой визы. Вот. Но последние 2 недели посольство США в Украине принимает только местных студентов, то есть ребят, которые имеют именно украинское гражданство. Да, поэтому еще раз скажу, ребята, которые живут сейчас в Украине, у вас вообще нет никаких проблем, для получения студенческой визы F1. То есть ближайшая дата записи на собеседование в Киеве для местных студентов, для студентов из Украины, это середина мая, начало июня. Студенты из России получают визы в Казахстане. Сейчас запись в Казахстане идет на июль месяц. Вот, периодически появляются места на более раннюю дату. Вот, ну и мы все очень надеемся, все студенты из России очень надеются, что посольство США в Украине возобновит свою деятельность в полном объеме, и они будут принимать студентов из России, так как это было буквально до последнего, до 30-го виза.
Я могу чуть-чуть уточнить на всякий случай касательно этого, то есть почему так произошло, что сейчас нельзя записаться. Очередной всплеск просто, и Киев опять попал в красную зону карантинную. То есть официально он должен 10 мая, если все будет хорошо, а уже тенденция идет, в общем-то, к снижению. Если Киев из красной зоны уберут, то посольство снова начнет принимать иностранных студентов, и это будет не проблема записаться, как мы это делали ранее с нашими студентами из России. Поэтому надеемся на лучшее, и вскоре это должно решиться.
Да, спасибо, Ростислав. Так, давайте посмотрим, есть ли у нас вопросы. У нас есть вопросы из контакта. Вот, this is a question for Blake. is it compulsory to be vaccinated in order to study in the USA?
Yeah, really good question. So it is not compulsory to get vaccinated to study in the United States. So you are not required to have the vaccination. Now, if you have the opportunity to get it, it's certainly encouraged, from that standpoint, but it is not compulsory. Now, at the moment, what is compulsory, though, is any person that is traveling into the United States. So whether even if you're an American citizen or just anyone at all that is coming into the United States, you do have to show proof of getting a negative COVID test within 3 days of your departure. So for example, if you're planning to come to the United States, you need to show proof that you got a negative test result of COVID 3 days before departing for your flight to come here. So at the moment, that's the only requirement. That may change in the future, but that's the currently time at now. But you do not have to get the COVID test to study here. So that is not required.
All right. And we got a question from Maria. Мария, да, я вам по-русски отвечу. Мы завтра обязательно вам отправим не только ссылки, но и всю необходимую информацию по Нью-Йорку и Бостону, потому что завтра наши сотрудники, включая меня и Ростислава, будем обзванивать всех сегодняшних участников вебинара. So, seems like we don't have any other questions. So, and let me, Blake, give me another couple minutes. So I need to share my screen again. And I need to tell more about our company and our bonuses for today.
Great, thank you.
Я хотел уточнить, видно ли всем экран? Видно, отлично. Да, и мы дошли до наших контактов. Еще раз скажу, наша компания Students International, мы работаем с 1992 года, в следующем году отмечаем юбилей. Я уверен, что мы это сделаем успешно. Да, и по всем вопросам, которые у вас могут возникнуть сегодня, после того, когда закончится наше мероприятие, вы можете писать на нашу почту, которая указана на экранах, usa@studenter.ru, телефон 495-125-1576 и наш основной информационный портал, это наш сайт. Запишите, пожалуйста, сделайте фото studenter.ru. Экзамену Ielts, да, вы всегда можете написать нашим коллегам на электронную почту ielts@studenter.ru, да, или зайти на сайт ielts.ru, выбрать ближайшую дату записи на экзамен Ielts, записаться и сдать этот тест в нашей компании. Ну а для тех студентов, кто уже знаком с экзаменом Ielts, да, и для тех студентов, которые хотят увеличить свой результат Ielts посредством нашей Ielts School, то, пожалуйста, запишите контакты нашей школы study@ieltsschool.ru, да, и у школы по подготовке Ielts есть свой собственный сайт ielts-school.ru. Обязательно запишите все эти контакты. И для всех сегодняшних слушателей мы приготовили несколько спецпредложений, достаточно интересных. Все слушатели, все участники сегодняшнего вебинара при зачислении в один из университетов, о которых мы сегодня с вами говорили, либо университет Массачусетса в Бостоне, либо Queen's College, да, получает стопроцентную скидку на услуги по зачислению в эти учебные заведения. То есть мы вас абсолютно бесплатно зачисляем в одно из указанных учебных заведений. Какое обязательное условие для того, чтобы получить бесплатное зачисление? Да, нужно было обязательно сегодня слушать презентацию. Да, у нас есть все регистрации участников, кто был на сегодняшнем мероприятии. И второе условие, вам необходимо заключить договор с нашей компанией. Наши услуги составят всего 1 рубль. Да, это будет не бесплатно, это будет 1 рубль, потому что в договоре мы просто не можем физически прописать 0 рублей. Да, поэтому наши услуги будут всего 1 рубль, если вы заключите договор с нашей компанией до 30 апреля, то есть до майских праздников. Вот. Также у вас есть возможность получить 20% скидку на обучение в Ielts School на групповых курсах при записи на эти курсы до 25 апреля до 12 часов по Москве. Вот. И я хотел бы дать слово Ростиславу. Ростислав, расскажи, пожалуйста, о контактах в украинском офисе, куда нужно обращаться студентам из Украины, куда писать, кому звонить.
Да, конечно, звонить нужно нам. Мы находимся в Киеве. Вы видите перед собой на экранах наш адрес. Мы находимся по улице Мечникова, 14-1. Это самый центр. Поэтому, пожалуйста, по номеру 238 25 25, если вы звоните из Украины, вот, мы всегда вам поможем, сориентируем. У нас также есть несколько других офисов по Украине, то есть если неудобно в Киеве, мы подскажем, куда можно обратиться по регионам, но главный офис, и я, в общем-то, сам нахожусь в Киеве, то есть конкретно смогу вас сориентировать, куда лучше, как лучше, со всем процессом поступления, с Ielts, это все по этому номеру телефона вы сможете узнать у нас. Также напоминаю, что все спецпредложения, которые уже Константин озвучил, у нас действуют также. Конечно же, единственное отличие, конечно, в нашем контракте будет прописана 1 гривна, ввиду того, что мы все-таки в Украине. Вот, поэтому не стесняйтесь, как уже Константин опять же говорил, завтра мы будем активно с вами всеми связываться, рассказывать дополнительную информацию. Возможно, у вас появятся какие-то новые вопросы, мы с удовольствием на них ответим. И больше деталей сможете от нас получить уже в личной беседе. Поэтому вот перед вами наши есть контакты. Обращайтесь, будем рады вам помочь.
Да, уважаемые участники, спасибо большое всем за сегодняшнее мероприятие. Давайте скажем все большое спасибо Блейку. Blake, thank you so much for your support and thanks again for covering both schools. So I think you did a great job. So and I know that you represent Queens College, but you know everything about Umass Boston, so thank you so much for covering both parts. So,
absolutely, no, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Konstantin, and
Да,
the
уважаемые
entire
участники
team.
вебинара. All right, thank you so much, Blake. Уважаемые участники вебинара, спасибо всем большое, что нашли время присоединиться к сегодняшнему мероприятию. Мы ждем вас, родителей, в наших офисах. Звоните, пишите нам, обязательно поможем вам в реализации ваших целей. Мы желаем всем крепкого здоровья, не болейте, будьте счастливы, путешествуйте, учитесь, потому что помните, что учение – это всегда свет. Все, всем пока.